Hello, everybody. This is Jen from Scrapping Posh, and I am here today with the Master Detective mini album. Goes along with my 221B Baker Street sand. Of course, these two projects are independent, so we can make one or the other or both. I'm using the 8.5 by 11 cardstock for the mini album, and I have my chipboard covers cut at 6.5 by 4.5. Two of those, and the spine is cut at 6.5 by 2.5. I placed my covers on top of 2 sheets of 8.5 by 11 paper. And I placed both the papers together so that the excess lines up in the middle of the spine. So you can see me making my marks where I'm going to cut those 2 pieces of paper. And I'll leave an inch overhang to adhere the 2 pieces of paper together. And it's going to make this cover approximately 8.5 by 13.5 by the time that it's done. And the seam will be in the middle of the spine. So while I'm taping this, I'll give you a little background information on these couple projects. This is the mini album, and I made this after the building was complete so that I could make sure that it would fit inside. It took me approximately 12 hours to make this mini album, and it took me approximately 15 hours to make the stand. There are cutting guides available on my blog under free downloads, and it's www.scrappingposh.blogspot.com. And there'll also be still shots in this video of the page cut lists. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking my T-square ruler and lining up on each side at 1 inch where these pieces of cardstock will go for the cover. All I'm doing is making sure that it is as square as I can get it. Now I line the outside of the chipboard with score tape, and it's very important to have a good adhesive when you do this. Once I start adhering the covers down, there'll be approximately 3/4 of an inch on all sides of the cardstock. And I'd like to thank everybody for being patient for this tutorial. For those of you who did not want to build the building, but you did want to see how the mini album was created, Joanne Sanders had sent me a message, so I'm glad I can finally get this up for you and everybody else who wanted it. And I would also like to put a disclaimer. The original cut file that was up for the 221B Baker Street on my blog had the wrong scale, the wrong dimensions for the building, and some extra parts. Since then, that has been fixed. So if you downloaded it previously, please download it again in order to have the proper scale and the proper pieces. And I'd like to thank Bethany for pointing that out. I appreciate the feedback, and I appreciate you trying the project. So I used the 1/2 inch score tape to go around all 4 sides of my cover. And then I just use ATG in the middle of the chipboard covers. I can also use spray adhesive for this. It was just easier to use the ATG. As long as you don't get any bumps or bubbles under it, this is a sufficient amount of adhesive to hold this down. The only reason I put adhesive in the middle of it at all is to make sure that I don't have parts of it that do bubble up. And I do the same for the spine. Please note that it is a good idea to put some 1/4 inch score tape between the spine and the covers. I forgot to do it on this one. I actually end up going back and doing it, but if you're doing this with me, yeah, put the score tape between the spine and the covers there. A little bit more about this project. There are 10 pages and there are 1/4 inch gussets. So the pages are extremely, well, not extremely small, about an 1/8 inch on either side. And when I made the hinge for this one, you guys will see that I only made a 1/4 inch hinge, 1/4 inch gussets and 1/4 inch hinges, which wasn't the easiest thing in the world to get the pages stuck on, but it did work. So um, I was actually just being lazy. If you guys wanted to make 1/2 inch hinges with 1/4 inch gussets, it would still work. You just need a bigger piece of paper and you have to splice it together. Now, in order to get my fold straight, I just fold the paper over, crease it, and I take the score tape off. And then I work it back and forth. I do the same to the sides. I tuck the dog ears under. I'm using my Cricut, I don't even know what it is. It's to get the stuff off the mat. And I like the way that works. It also works well for tearing the score tape, so it's a multi-purpose tool. And I use it to push down on my paper too instead of a bone folder. I was just sizing that up, making sure that before I put a whole bunch more work into it, that it was actually going to fit. And again, that's a 2.5 by 6, or I'm sorry, that's 11.5 by 6 space there, but I don't end up using that piece of cardstock. I use one on the front, one on the back, and then the spine. So that was kind of unnecessary. So now this is the spine, and it is 6 1/8 by 9 1/4. And I left an inch on the front and an inch on the back. And then I scored at a 1/4 inch 30 times. Again, the measurements are 6 1/8 by 9 1/4. There's an inch in the front and an inch in the back. And I scored at a 1/4 inch 30 times. And you've seen me working the paper a little bit, and that's just to get the paper, breaking up some of those fibers so it's easier for the paper to fold and for me just to work with the paper in general. So I did the yellow paper so that you guys could see it as an example. I thought it may be a little easier to see. And now I'm using my actual spine here or hinges with my black paper. And again, 1 inch in the front, 1 inch in the back, and scored it at a 1/4 inch 30 times. Now, if you were going to use the 1/2 inch instead of the 1/4 inch, the part that goes into the pages, then you would score it at a 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, and so on. So now you see me, it's it's the hidden hinge system from Kathy Order, so it's like every other bend folds up. And then I'm just using my ATG tape to tape those hinges together. It's very important to use stronger adhesive when you're taping the hinges to, or the whole hinge to the spine. So when I get to that point, I'm going to use score tape again and make sure I have complete coverage. But these, as long as the score tape holds the hinge on, these pieces aren't going anywhere, and it saves you a little bit of score tape by not having to use them on the insides of the hinges. The pages will have to be held on by score tape also, especially if you use the 1/4 inch system that I did here, because there's not a lot to grab onto. So you see me as I go, I'm kind of working those hinges back and forth. And again, it's to break down the paper fibers so that it's just easier to work with. It's more pliable. And I don't think I make you sit through the entire hinge system here. You guys kind of get the idea, I'm sure. And you guys have probably all done this before. Okay, so originally I had 31 scores. I only needed 30, so I just fixed that. And now I'm just measuring, and this, excuse me, the hinges on this measure exactly 2.5 inches. So they line up with the spine with no room on either side to spare. So basically you don't have any room on either side of the spine once you put it on. So you just got to make sure that you put it on straight and right in the middle horizontally. And now you'll see me completely cover this spine with score tape. Very important part of this, because if the spine comes loose, your whole book is ruined. So do not go cheap on the adhesive for the spine. Okay, and then I'm going to tear off all the, oh, before I put it on the book, I do, and I slowed it down so you guys can see, I cut these at a 45-degree angle on both sides. So you'll see it here in a minute when I lift it up. Every hinge is cut at a 45-degree angle on both sides. Now, when you do it this way, you end up with about a 1/16 of an inch at the bottom that's flat, and that's okay because the pages, you don't want the pages to go all the way up against the spine. You want it to have a little bit of room there. So I'm going to cut the other side and then I'll speed it back up here in a second. Okay, I'm just cutting up the other side. Okay, so I'm working with the spine a little bit more. I'm going to take the adhesive off the back. I'll put new adhesive on the top and bottom. And then I intentionally line my spine up almost flush with the bottom, leaving about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch at the top. And I did that because I have top tags that I didn't want to stick too far out of the album. However, at the end, I completely and totally forget that I've done this, and I make my album upside down. So if you choose to do that, just kind of mark somewhere top and bottom so that you're not confused like I got. So just want to make sure that everything lines up good and push down extra hard to make sure that that spine is adhered. These are the cut lists for the pages, and this is 5 sheets of this size, 4 3/8 by 6, and these are the flaps, so there'll be a total of 10 of them. This is the pockets, the base page and the top loading pocket, one of 4 by 6 1/8 and one by 5 by 6 1/8, and you'll score the 5 by 6 1/8 on 2 sides. You want to cut 10 of those. And you're also cut 10 pieces, 4 by 7 1/8, that will be cut, scored on top and bottom. And this is for the side loading pocket. The other 2 pieces on there are tags. One's a side loading tag and one's a top loading tag. And you'll also cut that one 10 times for a total of 25 pieces of paper for the hinges. So you've already used 2 pieces of 8.5 by 11 paper for the cover and one for the spine. So That's 28 pieces of cardstock, and technically that's all you'll need for this um, album. Now this is me taking that 4 by 7 1/8 piece of cardstock and scoring it at a 1/2 inch on the top and bottom. That makes the side pocket. And you really can't see what those they say, but it's just the dimensions. The piece of 4 by 6 1/8 is actually the base pocket. It stays flat. Nothing gets done with that. This piece here is 4 5/8 by 6 inches. I'm sorry, 4 3/8 by 6 inches. I cut a 1/4 inch off of it because this is the flap. And I didn't want it to be flush with the left side. I wanted a little bit of room. So by cutting it at 4 3/8 by 6 inches and scoring it at a 1/2 inch on one side, you end up with a flap that's just a tiny bit smaller than your complete page. So there is everything except for the top loading pocket, which I will add here in a minute. I think I do this page construction for you one more time. Okay, now the top loading pocket's next, and it is 5 by 6 1/8, and you score 1/2 inch on both sides of the 5-inch side, leaving your top pocket opening. I just cut those at a 45-degree angle so that there's not rough edges sticking out from underneath the pattern paper that I used to decorate. And I'm just showing you several different ways that these kind of fit together. And as I'm doing this, I'm actually trying to figure out the design of the pocket, so hopefully it's not too confusing. And right now I'm saying out loud the measurements for you that you'll never hear because it's nearly impossible to get this long in my house without interruptions, so that's why I have to do the voiceovers. Okay, so here is the piece of 5 by 6 and 1/8 cardstock. And I'm going to score it at a 1/2 inch on both sides. After I do this first page, the preliminary page, and I fit it all together, I go through and I do all the pages so that I don't have to pull out my scoreboard every time. And again, I cut the corners of the pockets at a 45-degree angle. And this is your page construction. Every page base looks like this. Okay, so now I have all of them cut, and this is the first page that I put together. And I am taking the 2 tags on, I think, are the upper left and all the way to the right. And those I just kind of set aside. Hopefully I move them out of the way. And then I put this page, the top loading pocket is right there. I'm putting the score tape on it right now. So that one was originally 5 by 6 1/8, and we scored it at 1/2 inch on each side. You put score tape on either side, and then you glue the bottom of the pocket so that when you put your top loading tag in there, it doesn't fall right through. Burnish the outer edges, cut those at a 45-degree angle. I'm pulling off the score tape and then running the bead of glue along the bottom. I flip that over and I line it up as closely to straight as I can. And it takes a little bit of patience, especially if you're doing all the pages at one time. Just take your time and try and do it right, because you can have problems later if you don't. Now, this is the side loading pocket. The side loading pocket goes on the opposite side that you glued the top loading pocket to. So you just take the score tape, run it up each side. That's what I'm trying to illustrate here. It goes on the opposite side. And you do not glue the back side of this down, because that's where your hinge is going to go. So now you have a pocket at the top, a pocket on the side, and now you're going to adhere your flap. Be sure to adhere your flap on the right-hand side of the page when the top pocket is at the top. If you glue it on the wrong side of the page, your flap will go the wrong direction and it will be too close to the hinge to work properly. So be sure it's on the right side of your page when your top pocket opens at the top. And I glued, I think, 1 or 2 pages together wrong while I was doing it, so just be careful. Now I'm going to start designing the first page. And I think I lose a little bit of footage on this, so I do apologize. I take the black from the black solids and patterns and distress the edges with black soot. And this is like a 16th inch shy. I'm not going to give you all the measurements exactly. Just know that all the photo or all the mats that I use in the album have a 16th of an inch border all the way around. So the design of this page is fairly simple. I take the black solid and pattern and use it on the background. I take a very thin strip. It's probably about 3/16 of an inch wide of the black and white checkered pattern. And then one of the cut aparts, or one of the fussy cuts I did from that black and white 12 by 12 pattern paper with all the skeletons on it. And I just adhere the top and bottom of that thin strip of paper. And then I adhere the whole right side of the skeleton, or the skull. And I took some of these stamps from the, what are they called? Took some of the stamps from the patterned borders, or the border strip paper, and inked those up with black soot and just glued those directly on there. Now this is a ephemera card and it fits perfectly on the left side of the page. I'm going to ink that up and I am going to adhere it directly to the page. But before I do that, I'm going to put a magnet. You'll see it here right underneath or to the right of the skeleton. And I put a piece of score tape on there to hold that magnet and adhere it directly to that paper. Make sure to leave about a 16th of an inch border on it and make sure that it does not exceed the left-hand side of that paper where your gusset goes. I'm taking this little tag from the borders and tags strip and I am adhering another magnet under it. Make sure that it's the right polar to not oppose the one that you put under the skeleton. And then I trace around it on this piece of scrap black cardstock. And I leave about a 16th of an inch all the way around. And I adhere that directly to the back of that little tag. And then this is a removable piece then. And I just stick a piece of cardstock under there to make sure that it will hold something. Now again, I made sure my pocket was on the top. Do not decorate it backwards. If your pocket is not on the top, you have the paper on backwards. So make sure you check that before you start decorating. Okay, so I cut this piece here to fit the inside front cover, and I'm just making sure that my pieces or my pages match each other. So I took another piece of that black solid from the solid patterns and solids paper and distressing it again, and I'm going to use that on the upper part of the cover. Again, about a 1/16 of an inch border on each side. And then I'm going to make a flap. And again, I don't have measurements, but you can see that I made this flap. I put this ephemera card directly on the flap. It has a 1/2 inch hinge on it. And then just cut around it. So it's approximately 3 1/8 by 4 1/8 because it's a 3 by 4 card. And I put that right on top. And then this pocket that I originally had down at the bottom, which there's a 1/2 inch on gusset on either side. I cut it down so that it would be, to make sure that it was below, it wasn't too tall, I guess. Glue the bottom to seal it. And you can see there's about an 1/8 inch of room between the pocket and that flap that we made with that ephemera card. Now I'm taking some of this black and white checkered paper, and it was a scrap. It was a little bit too big, or I'm sorry, it was a little bit too narrow. So I just took and cut it in half. Cut the border strip in half, or I'm sorry, I cut the border strip so that it would be the same length as those pieces of scrap. And then that way I made my paper stretch just a little bit further. This pattern paper is from the 8x8, I believe. That's where I lost some footage. The only thing that you missed was the tags, which I do 9 more times, so you'll see those. And then gluing down that skeleton. And then in that front pocket, that holds down, what you put in the front pocket holds down that that flap that we made. So my apologies, that should be the only footage that I lose through the whole thing. But you should be able to tell approximately what I did. I put a piece of that other black pattern on there from the 12 by 12 patterns and solids. And then I fussy cut that skeleton that you see right there with the lantern. And I glued that on the right hand side and left the lantern loose so that you can stick something underneath there and then adhere that lantern to it. I also used the multi-matte medium on that because it seemed to be a very flimsy piece, and I wanted to ensure that it wouldn't get damaged. Now what you're seeing me do here is create another page the same exact as the first page. I just wanted to show you again. That was the side loading pocket going on top of the base. And then this time I secure the flap before I put the top loading pocket on. And here I'm making sure that the top loading pocket, I put the tags in there so I didn't get confused. So the top loading pocket is definitely towards the top once I glue that that flap on. Another thing that is a good idea to do is to fit your pages onto the album as you go so that you know they fit. Now, the page on the left-hand side is the back of page 1, and the page on the right-hand side is page 2. So you'll see these two pages together. And I like to do mine by color. So the first page was a black page. This is going to be a red page. And I took this sticker. It's a long rectangular sticker from the 12 by 12 sticker sheet, and I'm going to put a magnet under it. And the magnet is about a 1/16 of an inch thick, which for something that's this thin is a little bulky. So instead of letting that 1/16 of an inch raise or make it rise so far, I'm using 2 pieces of cardstock stacked on top of each other, and I just trimmed a circle in them so that it has more of a gradual effect. And that way that magnet isn't like, you don't see that big circle sticking out of it. And I just glue that onto a piece of paper and leave room on the side for a 1/2 inch hinge. And I glue that directly to that side of the first page. And then I put a magnet on the side with the skeleton, and then I put a magnet underneath the pattern, or the pattern solid, that red piece right there, so that that closes and it sticks down. And it works well. There's no issue like I had with the door where the magnets are stacked up, don't magnetize, I guess. And this little piece here is for the chipboard, or from the chipboard elements, and I just cut it out. I use the nail file to get that little piece off of it, and then I just glue down the bottom half so that something can slide underneath it. This saying is from the sticker sheet, and it's in red. I'm not sure what it says. And then I have this little book plate left over from a Studio Calico embellishment, I think. And I thought that that was perfect for this page. That's one of the only embellishments that I use that isn't from the Graphic 45. Now I use this red piece of paper here, and I'm using it for the inside of my second page. I just take this piece of cardstock, and I don't know what size it is, but you can see it leaves about a 1/4 inch on each side, about a 1/2 inch at the bottom and an inch at the top. And I just made it a pocket by gluing around 3 sides. And then I have these corner pieces from the sticker sheet. Stick those in the upper right hand corner and the lower left hand corner. And I'm just trying to make sure that I didn't stick them all the way down so that you can make sure that something can go underneath those. Also from the sticker sheet is this, I think that's Mary, and there's 2 pieces. There's this frame that I'm gluing down now. It's going to be glued directly to the pocket. And then in the center of the pocket, there's Mary. So I take a piece of black cardstock and I trace the circle around it, and I leave a little square that I'm going to use for a hinge. And I think you'll see that here in a minute. You see where it is sticking out. I just fold that down and it makes a hinge. So I took a black permanent marker. I went around the inside of the sticker so that if I don't get it perfectly lined up with this circle, you can't tell. There's not a big stark white circle. So I stick it to the circle. I make sure that it's as straight as possible by putting it in the frame. I cut the excess and then I glue down that little square tab. And there you see that it flaps open like a little locket. And then I use one of the little circles from the sticker sheet to embellish the inside of that. Inking everything up with black soot on this page. And that's the end of the first tutorial. I hope you guys like it. And I shall continue with the rest of page 2. If you guys have any questions about page construction, just leave me a comment. I will make a special video to clarify anything that you guys need if I can't do it in the comments. So again, I appreciate it and I hope this was insightful. And I will see y'all back with the second half of the tutorial.